the Ethereum blockchain, or we can call it as the Ethereum world computer. So before going into that, let me just ask you, like, what is blockchain, or what do you feel like, whether blockchain is useful or not, or whether blockchain will be beneficial or not? What's your thought? Like, anyone can simply just comment on the chat, or you can use your mic also if possible. What's your thought on blockchain? Anyone?
Hello.
Yeah, please carry on.
Sir. Actually, I think blockchain, it is a decentralized application where the nodes are connected peer to peer, and where the communication takes place though the parties are not trusted. Means we can means the communication can take place among the peoples. Though they do not trust each other, and it is completely secure and transparent uh, application. It is
Good. Okay.
decentralized.
Yeah, good. Very good definition. So I think, yeah, that's one of the well-known definitions for blockchain. So I hope you all know what exactly is blockchain. I think you have a fairly good understanding of what exactly is happening in blockchain, and you have studied about Bitcoin also. So Bitcoin was primarily only for the cryptocurrency. Like, you have a currency in the network, and you can do only the currency transactions. No other application development or general purpose applications can't be run on Bitcoin. So that's where the relevance of blockchain, or a programmable blockchain came into play. That's where we started exploring Ethereum. So just to brush up the things, like, if you might have already learned about these things, like, it is truly decentralized, it's immutable, and it's instant. Say, like, you can have real-time transactions without any intermediaries or third parties. So that's the beauty of blockchain. That's what, as Ma'am was mentioning, it's a completely distributed ledger of transactions, where you can ensure security and transparency, even without trusting anyone. Like, it is almost a trust-free or a trustless kind of environment. And you can say, like, this is almost anonymous or pseudo anonymous. Say, like, you don't want to reveal your identity, or you don't want to do any kind of KYC or any third party verification kind of things. So that is what exactly the Bitcoin's idea of blockchain, or the Bitcoin's idea of distributed ledger bring to this world. And that's where the people started exploring about blockchain. So I think this is the very simple kind of things. If you want to just brush on the things, I would say, like, blockchain is nothing but a ever-growing book, where the blocks form the pages, and when the pages combine together in a sequential fashion, it forms a book that we can call it as a blockchain. And like, books are almost static ones, but blockchains are always dynamic. So, like, it keeps on growing. And why I have just quoted the example of a Harry Potter storybook is, like, as you know, every node have the same copy. So if you purchase a copy of Harry Potter, like, everyone have the exactly same storybook with them, and nobody can change the story. Even, say, the author J.K. Rowling is trying to change the story, it is not possible, because the copies are already out in the market, and it is there with all the nodes. So uh, in a truly decentralized network, when the number of nodes increases, or when the number of participants increases, it becomes really difficult to hack the network, or really difficult to tamper or change the things. So that is the beauty of blockchain. That is how the cryptographic hashing and the consensus comes into play. And you can see I've just put a very basic figure. Hope everyone know this. I don't want to make this boring. Like, if you just want to brush up things, you can just go through it. So our primary aim for today's lecture is to focus on the programmable versions of blockchain. That is how you can build your applications, or how you can build your own solutions on top of blockchain. And that is where we have the different models. Say, like, the first model is a current one, which is more or less the centralized server mechanisms, which is currently being used in almost all the systems, whether it is banking, supply chain, finance, or whatever the kind of things. You all have the core client server kind of architectures. Even your Facebook, WhatsApp, and all those social media, they have their own web servers. So even though you can tell, like, ideally internet is decentralized, but it is lying in the hands of some web servers, so you can't tell that it's truly decentralized. Then next, you have the public blockchains and the permissioned one, or the private ones. So public blockchains is more or less same as that of a Bitcoin network. That's what we will be focusing in today's session, which is on the Ethereum. And the permission one, I think on day 3 and day 4, you'll be having sessions on permission one, that is the Hyperledger and Corda kind of networks, which is I won't call it as a blockchain. It is a what do you call, a distributed ledger with some kind of permissions and restrictions. So this model 2 or the public blockchain is a truly permissionless public one that exactly replicates the Bitcoin's model, or the entire Bitcoin blockchain model is replicated only by this model 2. That's what we'll be focusing in today's session. And moving to Ethereum. So I think you're clear with the Bitcoin blockchain network. Ethereum blockchain network is exactly the same as that of a Bitcoin blockchain network, with some minor changes, or with some very minor changes. So let's go into that. It's completely open source. Bitcoin was also open source. It is public and blockchain based. Bitcoin 2 was the same kind of things. And the third point that makes the difference, it is a smart contract based. We will go into smart contract in depth. Smart contract is nothing but a self-executing program. That is where you can write your code, or you can write your own programming stuff into the blockchain network, and you can start building your applications. So that is not there in Bitcoin network, because Bitcoin, the protocol was already written into the blockchain, right from the first block. The entire cryptocurrency protocol is written. You can't change it, or you can't alter it. Only you can do some kind of forking mechanisms. No other changes are allowed in Bitcoin. And the last point, like, it is a truly decentralized and distributed computing platform, like same as Bitcoin also. And you have a native currency token. Like in Bitcoin, you have the BTC, or the coin part. Similarly, inside the Ethereum network also, you have a token mechanism that is just to run the smart contracts, or just to run the applications. You need some kind of fuel, or you need some kind of what do you call, you need some kind of money to be spent, and that is represented in terms of a token called as Ether. It is typically mentioned as a 3-letter alphabet, ETH or ETH. And as you all know, like, it was launched in 2013. Hope you know, like, Bitcoin, the white paper was launched in 2008, and the network was live by 2009. So hardly after 4 to 5 years, Vitalik Buterin, he was just 19 years of age while he was launching this Ethereum white paper. In 2013, he launched a white paper, and by 2014, it was live. I think the first network was live by 2015. So it's hardly 5 years old, I would say. Like the developers net was live by 2015 only. So hardly 5 years old network. And people started calling it as the new internet, or the Web 3.0. You know, like currently you are using the Web 2.0 or the current internet applications. Web 3.0 means it is a truly decentralized network where anyone across the world can simply join the network. No one can restrict, or no one can censor, or no third parties or middlemen will come and block you or come and attack you. It's like a completely decentralized distributed world, which we will see how things are working. So this is just a basic introduction, just to avoid your confusion between Bitcoin and Ethereum, because commonly people ask, like, okay, Ethereum is another cryptocurrency, or Ethereum is another token. I would say, like, Ethereum have its own token, like it is ETH or Ether. If you are a trader, or if you are into cryptocurrencies, you can definitely trade with Ether token also. But the idea behind Ether is not to do trading, or not to have a cryptocurrency, because you know, like, Bitcoin have a upper limit. Like there are only 21 million Bitcoins ever in the network, and I think currently more than 19 million is in circulation. But for Ethereum, there is no upper limit, or there is no kind of what do you call, the supply limitation. The idea behind Ether, or the idea behind ETH, is to fuel the network, or to use as a token, which will be used to fuel each and every smart contracts, or each and every applications which are running in the network. That is just like to help the developers to deploy the applications. That is the idea behind Ether. Just like how you will be using your cloud credits, like your AWS or GCP kind of cloud credits, or how you are going to deploy your website using some droplets, or using some paid domain servers and all. So just like how you're going to pay for that, similar to that, you can term like this is a token which you want to pay for using that network. Okay, so moving further, like as I already mentioned, this was started as a white paper in 2013. You can just go and check ethereum.org where the entire details are there. And it was founded by Vitalik Buterin along with Dr. Gavin Wood. Gavin Wood wrote the yellow paper. And then Joseph Lubin. Joseph Lubin is the founder of Consensus also, which is one of the biggest companies in the blockchain world. So these three were the creators. And the interesting part is like uh, they founded Ethereum as a fundraiser or as an ICO on top of the Bitcoin network. Like they raised $18 million in 2013 in terms of a token sale. Hope you know about what is a token sale or what is an ICO in a Bitcoin context. Just like you have a project idea, you tells like, okay, this is what is a current value. Say I have an XYZ project and one XYZ token tends to $1 today. I tell like, okay, you can buy this XYZ token for $1 today, whose value will rise to uh, $10 or $100 after 3 years or after 5 years. That is the kind of things which I will do with my project. So similarly, they pre-sell this Ether or ETH token in 2013 or using Bitcoin network. Like they raise fund using Bitcoins. And the first network was launched in 2015. I will show you the timeline. Like this is a roadmap. So in 2015 May, the first test network Olympic was actually released. That was just a test net. The Frontier version, that is on 30th July of 2015, that was the first beta version to be released, which was used by the developers as well as the testers for checking the network. And later in 2016, the Homestead version was released. That is where it became more popular, or the common developers or the what do you call it, enthusiasts started trying to work with Ethereum with the Homestead network. And then later on in 2017, they had a new version upgrade known as Metropolis. So I think you have studied about the consensus mechanisms yesterday. There is proof of work, which is the most celebrated one used by Bitcoin as well as Ethereum. But Ethereum have the plan to change from proof of work to proof of stake. You know, like proof of work is nothing but a cryptographic puzzle being solved, and you need to spend a lot of computational power. So the drawback is like you want to have huge computational power, and you need to have that much kind of hardware capacity also. So proof of stake means it's just like betting. Like you are putting a stake for a particular thing. Say like I'm telling, okay, today is Thursday, and I'm putting a stake. But all of you can verify like today is not Thursday, this is just Tuesday. So if I'm going wrong, my stake will be lost, or I'll lose the things. So Ethereum, the idea is like they will migrate from the proof of work to proof of stake, and the work is actually progressing. By the next year, it will be truly moving to proof of stake. There are already some smaller networks which already use a proof of stake network. So the 2017, the Metropolis update was the start of their experimentation on migration from proof of work to proof of stake. Then in 2019, they released the next version of Metropolis known as Constantinople. And there was another update like Istanbul. So here what they actually did is like they uh, did some changes with the mining rewards. Like initially the mining rewards was around 5 ethers, then changed to 3 ethers, and currently just 2 ethers. And ideally they will be reducing the mining rewards, just like the Bitcoin halving. I think you know, like in the early days the Bitcoin mining rewards was 50 Bitcoin, and every 4 years it is halving. Say like 50 to 25, 25 to 12.5, and currently in 2020 the Bitcoin mining reward is just 6.75. So similarly, Ethereum also, they are also doing their own things to reduce the mining rewards and moving from proof of work to proof of stake. And very recently, in March 2020, the ETH 2.0. ETH 2.0 means like the next version of Ethereum, which will be truly following the proof of stake. Like they will be following some new concepts like the beacon chain and sharding, where you will have some side chains with the main chain. Just like your spinal cord, you will have a main bone and some sub bones kind of things. So you'll have some side chains which reduces the complexity of main chain, and you can move to the proof of stake. I think I don't want to explain too much on proof of work and stake. And the ultimate aim is to move to the Cernity version. So this version is yet to be announced. Say like researchers predict like by 2021 we will move to the next version, that is the Cernity version. So the thing is like you can see the roadmap. It is hardly 5 years old. I can tell like, and this is in a very early stage. Say like the research is going on and more updates are coming up. So this is the right time from the researcher perspective as well as from the developer perspective to be a part of the network, to contribute to the network and learn from this. Because if you're going to learn CPP, Java or Python, you know like this is more than 10 years of old, or you need to have a lot of history in the background. But this is the right time where you can be the pioneers, or you can be the front runners in this kind of technology. That is what I want to just show with this roadmap. And as mentioned earlier, there is a kind of forking. I think you might have already heard about forking in the first session of Bitcoin. Like forking is nothing but just branching the thing based on some new protocols. Say like, okay, I am telling like currently we all are in work from home mode, or we all are in a COVID pandemic situation. Say from tomorrow onwards, I'm telling like, okay, we will go to office. Some other people tell like, okay, we may not be going to office, we will be in work from home mode, which means like at that juncture you have a you have a branching where some people opt for work from home mode, or some people opt for a go to office kind of mode. So that kind of protocol changes can happen based on some new inputs. So here you can see some of the forking which happened in Ethereum, and not going into the Bitcoin forking, because I think you have already learned about the Bitcoin forking in the last session. The Ethereum started in 2015, and in 2016 they just stopped the frontier version, because that was just a very basic thing, and they started the Homestead version. And in 2017 there was a major hack in the Ethereum network. Hack in the sense like one of the first dApps to be released on Ethereum was known as DAO, or Decentralized Autonomous Organization, which raised more than 15 million in 2016, that period. But there was a flaw in the smart contract where an attacker drained a lot of money from the network. So at that time, since there are very few applications on Ethereum and most of the money was stuck in that particular attack, Vitalik Buterin and his team was forced to revoke a block. This was actually against the principles of a blockchain. As you all know, like once a block is created based on the principles of blockchain, you cannot roll back or you cannot change the things. So there was a huge controversy happening in Ethereum in 2016-17 period, like whether you can roll back or whether you can revoke or not. But again, with the interest of the community, because many people got their money stuck in the network, so Vitalik and his team was forced to do an illegal thing, which means like they had to roll back that block. And that is where it split into two in 2017 October. The people who followed the basic network forms the Ethereum Classic, and the new network forms the Ethereum Metropolis, or the ETH community. So Ethereum Classic, even though it is sticking to the basic blockchain principles, but it have very less developer community support, and not much people are actually supporting it. Even though the network is still live, but the developer support is very low. But Vitalik and the entire Ethereum team is still following this main chain, that is Ethereum Metropolis, then the Constantinople, and will come up. So even though you can argue like, okay, the current Ethereum network, it have a crime in the backend side, like once it roll back the all the basic principles of blockchain and reward the things. Yes, I would definitely admit that. And Ethereum Classic is a true blockchain network, which you can say like it have never reverted back, but still the developer support or the community support is much less, because you know like Buterin, Gavin Wood, Joseph Lubin, all those big players are still in this network. So that's why the developer community is also in this side. So just for your information, say like these things can also happen in the network, but that was happened just once. It never happened again, because now the network is much large, and the smart contracts are also much well developed. You have all the functionalities just like a normal programming language, so no need for this kind of reverting anymore. And the comparison, just like a quick comparison between Bitcoin and Ethereum. You can see that text, like in Bitcoin, you can do only the coin transactions. Say like you can transfer BTCs or Bitcoins between two persons, and that is the only thing which you can do in Bitcoin. In Ethereum, you can transfer ETH or the native tokens of Ethereum. Plus, you can also send the data part also. Like it's not mandatory that all the transactions should be coin transactions. That's why along with sending, along with that message, like sending 10 Ether from Jade to Pete, I'm also setting a condition if Jade's balance is 50 Ether and the date is after 12/11/2019, which means like I can also set a condition with my smart contracts or with my programming part. So this will look more or less same as a normal application, your normal web application or mobile application or Windows application kind of things. This will look as a more normal kind of stuff. So that is the beauty of Ethereum. And the difference I think you can see over here, both have its own tokens. Bitcoin have BTC and Ethereum have ETH. The block time Bitcoin, even though theoretically it says about 8 minutes, but it will take anywhere between 8 to 15 minutes. And in Ethereum, it takes hardly around 11 to 15 seconds, or ideally 14 seconds is what Ethereum takes, which is much faster than Bitcoin. And the block size of Bitcoin is almost fixed at 1 MB, but Ethereum have a variable block size, say like right from 2 KB till bigger block size based on the smart contracts and the number of transactions. You can have a fluctuating block size to accommodate more transactions. And the scripting is limited in Bitcoin, limited in the sense only some forking and protocol updates can happen in Bitcoin. No other programming can happen. But that is the most important thing with Ethereum. That is like you have the distributed data storage plus computing. That computing is done using the smart contracts or the programming part. I think in the coming 2 sessions, like you have 2 more sessions today in Ethereum where you will be learning the basics of programming in Ethereum, and you will go through it. And I think on day 4 and day 5, you have sessions on Truffle, MetaMask, and other advanced tools on Ethereum also. So economic model, like since Bitcoin, the coin size is always limited. It will shrink after every 4 years. Like in 2008, it was 50. And then in 2012, it became 25, 16, it became 12.5, and now it is 6.25. It is almost fixed. I would say like there is no exact shrinking in Ethereum. But when the new protocol update happens, they will be reducing it. I think currently it is around 2 Ethers, but they will be reducing it to 0.6 Ethers very soon when they will migrate to the proof of stake. And the transaction fee in Bitcoin is simple using the UTXO model. I think you might have heard about UTXO model yesterday, using the unspent transaction model. That is just like locking your account, doing a transaction, then only you will unlock the things. That is what happens with a Bitcoin network. But in Ethereum, it's more complex. Complex in the sense like it actually works just like a bank. There is no locking, there is no direct locking mechanism, but you have 2 types of accounts in Ethereum. I will come into that. You have 2 different types of accounts, and you have the transactions also. And the computational power is either on the distributed storage of Bitcoins, but in Ethereum, you have a Turing complete language, and then you have a Turing complete virtual machine known as EVM. That is what which runs the Ethereum. So we will figure it out. Anyway, on a broader perspective, I can just tell like Ethereum is a programmable version of Bitcoin, or you are doing some kind of updations on top of Bitcoin network, which makes it more programmable to develop the dApps. That is what Ethereum is. And don't get confused between Ether and Ethereum. Ethereum is the underlying network on top of which we will be developing applications and writing smart contracts. Ether is just the token or just a currency, which I would say like this is a fuel of the network, or you can deploy applications or you can run the smart contracts only if you have some Ethers in your hand. Then only you can do the things, just to make sure that there is no attack, because only genuine people who have Ether in their hand can do the transactions on Ethereum, and which avoids any new party or any unknown entity to do some transactions, because if there is no kind of what do you call it, no kind of fuel in it, anyone can do it. Just compare between a bike and a cycle. Like if you are keeping both a motorcycle and a cycle as unlocked, for a cycle you don't need a fuel. You can simply if you have legs, you can simply cycle it through. But for a motorcycle, if there is no petrol inside, you can't ride it. You may be trying to wheel it, but you can't ride it. So that's the main difference, because here there is no central authorities or no third parties to control the network. So these tokens will be actually controlling the network, just like the bitcoins which were there. And you can also create new cryptocurrencies on top of the Ethereum network. I think almost all the major cryptocurrencies available in the world, they were started as a ICO or a token on Ethereum network, and when they had sufficient number of nodes, they migrated to their own network. For example, the EOS, Tron, Neo, Tether, all those networks and coins, they started from the Ethereum public blockchain network. And once they had a sufficient number of miners or sufficient number of nodes, then they migrated to their own network. So this is one of the best platform to start your own new cryptocurrency or your own new tokens. And now we'll be moving to the basic stuff, or the science part of Ethereum. So Ethereum primarily works on the basis of a state of the computer, because as you know, it is a truly decentralized and distributed, which means all the participants in the network across the world can simply join an Ethereum network if you have a internet connectivity. So how you validate whether you are in the right track, or whether you are getting the right transaction data or not. So that is where they are working on a concept called as state, because I think all of you may be knowing about the input state and output state of any computing thing. Like, you take an input state, do some kind of computing, which will give you an output state. So same is the case with Ethereum also. It always work with the current state, that is what is the data in the latest block, which will be immutable and tamper proof. So if I am into the network, I will check what is the current state which is globally accepted. And if this is the current state, okay, I will just start working from it. Suppose say for example, we all are in a blockchain network. Say I have around 50 participants attending this particular session, and suppose a new person is directly joining to this session. So if he is not watching the live video, or if he's just watching the YouTube recording, he doesn't know what is the current state, or where the current lecture is actually happening. Because um, if you are in the live session, you know, like, okay, this is the current slide and I'm speaking on this particular topic. So you have to align with this particular thing. Like, you can just brush up through the previous slides and you can align with the things. Otherwise what happens is like, okay, you don't have a central authority, or you don't have a teacher or a admin to ask what is the current scenario. You will be either in some back slides, or you will go to some slides in the future. So you will lose the synchronization. So this is just to make sure that the network is actually synchronized. And nodes is the actual machines which will be storing this EVM state. EVM is nothing but the Ethereum virtual machine. I will come into that. It is all the participants who are participating in the Ethereum network, and who will be participating in the consensus mechanism. That is, currently it is a mining kind of things. So they can be the nodes. There are different types of nodes. I'm not going too much deep there. There are full nodes, light nodes, and many other different kinds of things. So full node means that they will store the entire history of the Ethereum blockchain. That is, starting from the block 0, what is the current block number, they will have the entire copy with them. But if you are just logging in from a mobile phone or from a normal laptop, you may not be able to run a full node, because you may not be having that much storage capacity or computing capacity. So you can be a light node, or you can be a peer which will be connecting to some other kind of full nodes. That's also a possibility. And then you have the accounts. So for any person who is onboarding to the Ethereum network, they have their own identity, not in a KYC kind of things, but with some accounts. So there are mainly two types of accounts in Ethereum. First is EOS, or externally owned accounts, which is primarily the personal account, just like your bank account number. For every individual, you can have an account, and there is no limit, like one person should have only one account. You can create as much number of EOS as you wish. And the other thing is a contract account. That is, for every smart contract which is created for Ethereum, the contract will have its own identity, which is known as the contract account. Because say for example, in a classroom, I'm teaching about writing a smart contract for banking. So everyone will have the same logic, and everyone will do the same smart contract. Say like you will deposit some amount, you will withdraw some amount, and all of you will be writing the same code. So how you will differentiate code of person A from person B if it is an exactly same replica? So there, every contract will have its own unique address. That is what is a contract account address, where each and every party will have their own address. And you can also deposit ethers for contract, because if the contract have to self-execute, like without the involvement of any third parties or uh, um, any individuals, you can also deposit some amount of ethers in the contract account. Otherwise, you can also deploy contract account without any ethers. So only when some individuals come and pay for it, then only it will start working. uh, just consider a scenario of a petrol pump. So in a petrol pump, whenever you pay for the money, you will get the fuel, or you are actually paying for the things and you will get the fuel. But consider a solar lamp in the street light, or a street light. So every evening, even if they are paying or not, it should actually work. That is, the lamp should have its own meter and its own switchboard, and it should actually work. So that is a two variants. Say like you can have contract accounts with either or without either, plus you have the externally owned account. So it is nothing but a simple wallet kind of mechanism, where Ethereum have its own wallets, just like your Paytm or PhonePe kind of things, which will help you to maintain your accounts and store your Ether balance also. We will see it in the examples. I think you will learn about MetaMask wallets and some other examples in today's sessions and the upcoming sessions in day 3 and day 4. Then you have the EVM. EVM stands for Ethereum Virtual Machine. I think all of you will be familiar with the JVM or Java Virtual Machine. Like you have a program code which will compiled and deployed. So any machine which have the virtual machine can simply run that bytecode. That is, you don't need to supply the actual program code or actual handwritten code. You can just compile and deploy it as a bytecode, and you just need to share only the bytecode. So similarly, EVM is a thing which makes Ethereum a global network or a world computer. That is, any machine which have an EVM can be a part of this global virtual computer, where this whose state where every participant on the network can store and agree on. Like all the participants in the network will agree, like, okay, this is the current state, and we will keep on working from it. So that is how the things will actually progress. Just like how you actually do the financial transactions, or how you actually take attendance, or all those kind of things. Like you want to have an agreement between all the participants, and which should have its own states. Like if I want to do a financial transaction, I should know my account balance, and based on that account balance only I can trigger a transaction. If I have just 1,000 rupees, I can't initiate a transaction of 2,000 rupees unless I have a credit limit or something else. And say, for example, you're taking an attendance. Say it's an online classroom and you're taking an attendance online. You have to check like whether all the nodes are there in online and they are in the current state. Like some people may just log in and put the mic in mute, or cam in, put the webcam as off, and do some other job. So that won't be agreed. You should have to check whether all the participants or all the students are having in the same state. Like you can just come and verify whether they are live or not. So that is a kind of state. And the transaction, I think you already know about what is a transaction blockchain. It's a formal request. That's a code execution in EVM, which makes a transaction either a completely fulfilled request. That is, a sender can send some transactions or some money or some tokens to a receiver. It will just check whether the receiver address is right or wrong, and whether the sender have signed the transaction properly. And once it is validated by all the nodes, or at least 50% of nodes in the network validates this transaction, you can simply commit the transaction, or that transaction get committed, and it will add on to the block. Same as that of Bitcoin. The only difference is like here you can have transaction, that is, you can have transactions beyond a coin or beyond a token part. Like you can do the general purpose applications also. So these are some of the very basic terminologies in Ethereum which you will come across when you are doing the programming, or when you are doing the things. I will explain each and every one when I'm going in depth. So let me move on to the main part, that is the smart contracts, which is the most important building block of Ethereum. So smart contracts is nothing but self-executing programs, just like how you are writing your programs in CPP, Java, or Python kind of things. But why we are calling it as smart contracts is like even though it is a program, we will be primarily focusing on the business logic. That is, what exactly is the business domain and how things should work, or that protocol will be actually written in the smart contracts, not just a print statement or something of that kind which you write in program. The core business logic where two parties can come and collaborate or multi-party agreements can happen. So that kind of agreements, when formed in a digital format, makes the smart contracts. So here you may not be writing a simple sorting or a simple printer statements for smart contracts. What you will do is like you will define the exact logic. Say for example, I have a supermarket and I have to do the billing with smart contracts. What I will do is like with all the producers and with all the manufacturing units, they will have some barcode or some kind of things which will be read by my smart contracts. And what my smart contracts does is like it will fetch the payment from consumer. Say the tax or the GST part will be getting into the government's account, and the remaining amount will be going to my accounts. So I don't need to have a cashier or an accountant over there. Uh, the clients simply come and take the products and they just pay for it. And once the payment is happening, they can just quickly scan the QR or some other kind of things, and uh, you will just take the product and all the payments will happen. So that kind of business logics will be primarily focused with smart contracts. That is, it can actually store data as well as send and receive transactions, and or even interact with other contracts also. Say like contract to contract interactions is also possible. So anything which can be done in a physical world can also be converted to the digital world by using the smart contracts. So for example, the land registry thing, like you have a physical record for transfer of land or for renting a house or for some other properties, or even the banking or the supply chain kind of things. So all those things, say like you're purchasing some product from Amazon. So what you do is like you pay the amount in advance and you wait for your product. So what happens if that delivery is not happening? So if there is a smart contract, what it will do is like, okay, you pay an amount, the amount will be locked in the smart contract. And once you receive the product and it is, the customer is verifying the product, then only that amount will be moving to the receiver's account. So you have a trust like, okay, there is a well-defined contract which ensures like, okay, my amount is not wasted or I'm not losing my money. So this is highly useful when you are dealing with anonymous entities or untrusted entities, or where you doesn't know what is going to happen with that person, or even with the trusted entities also. Say like even with your friends or family or your relatives also, if you have a fairly good smart contract, that will be easier to make your transactions happen. And as I already mentioned, this is maintained inside the network. That is, the smart contracts will lie inside the blockchain network without any central ownership or control. Like if Amazon is having a smart contract, which doesn't means like Amazon is going to own it. Amazon will deploy the smart contract in the public blockchain network or in the Ethereum blockchain network. And any consumers who are going to purchase from Amazon, they can just simply come and verify, okay, this is a contract, like I have to pay this amount in advance, or I am taking an EMI, or I am taking a cashback offer, whatever be the kind of offers which Amazon is providing. These are the conditions and this is how things will be working. If you're agreeing for it, you just take the contract, you make the payment, and you can ensure things are happening properly. So same things happen with supply chain also. Like, a lot of shipping and all those things, it takes huge amount of time. Say shipping will take around 2 weeks to 3 weeks, or even months, or that kind of time is needed. So what if you're going to pay in advance? Like you don't have an assurance whether the product will be receiving in shape or the product will have the quality. So there you can lock your money in smart contracts, so that the seller can also guarantee, okay, the consumer have locked the money in smart contract. So if I am doing a genuine transaction, or if I'm delivering my product genuinely, I will definitely get my amount. So both the parties have an assurance. That is what is happening in smart contracts. And you have your own specific programming languages for writing smart contracts. In Ethereum, the most famous language is Solidity. There are other languages like Viper, Mutant, LL, and all, but primarily Solidity is the most famous language which is used for writing smart contracts. And for executing the smart contracts, that is for executing each and every line of smart contracts or each and every portion of smart contracts, you need to spend some amount of Ether. That is because just to ensure no illegal entities or no fake entities can simply come and run a smart contracts, because If I'm a genuine customer only, then only I have to log into Amazon and I have to make a purchase. So for that purchase, I will pay a minor amount of fee, or I'll pay a minor transaction fee for the smart contracts, which will be taken care of by this network. So that is how things actually work, and it's accessible and transparent, like just like the open API. So you can, once you have a contract in place, then you can build your applications, build your decentralized applications on top of this network. That is the beauty of the decentralized applications. So this is actually the two things combined together. Say smart contract, you can think it like a backend code or a server-side scripting, which will be running in the blockchain network, or just like how you are deploying your server-side scripting on the server. Here, instead of server, you have the blockchain network, and you will write the smart contracts in the blockchain network. And then you have the decentralized application, that is your front-end application, which combines the smart contract with your UI or the user interface. So DApp can be a mobile application, can be a web application, Windows application, whatever be the kind of thing which you prefer. It is similar to what you are actually want your customer to visit. So the customer may not find a difference between whether it is a blockchain application or whether it is a database application, because if Amazon is using blockchain in the backend, the front end or the cart will be exactly the same as that in the current system. The only difference is like you will have the backend instead of server, you will have a blockchain network over there, and instead of server-side scripting, you will have the smart contracts. So many banks, say like in Kerala also, banks like Federal Bank, South Indian Bank, even the Lulu Exchange, all those guys are currently using blockchain networks for their international remittance and payments. So this is an internal process which they use for their international payments. But as a normal customer, say if you're using a mobile app of Federal Bank or a mobile app of South Indian Bank, you may not be knowing whether they have the blockchain in backend or whether they have this thing in backend or not. So there won't be too much difference in user interface. But if you want to make sure that your customer wants to know, okay, I'm running on blockchain, definitely you can figure it out, but it doesn't have huge difference. So that is the beauty of decentralized applications. So it makes it easier for adoption. Say like it's not like a complete disruption which makes all the things obsolete. You can simply switch on from the current applications to the decentralized applications, provided you have a better smart contract and a blockchain network. And the DApp and its backend code will be running on the completely decentralized peer-to-peer network. It is, once it is deployed, it is unstoppable, uncensorable, and independent, which means like it is less prone to attack, and no governments or no third parties can simply come and stop it, because this will be running across all the nodes across the network. So you can't simply stop it. Just like your torrent mechanism, I think you'll be aware about the torrents which you use for downloading movies quite a few years back. Once a movie is in the torrents, you can't simply remove it from a single server or 2 or 3 servers. It will be there in multiple servers. So same is a thing here also. And it's deterministic, like you can perform the same function irrespective of the environment, which means it is one of the most important property of a programming language. Just like it should be deterministic and Turing complete, to make sure that for any input you get the same input, so that you can use it in whatever context you wish. And it has zero downtime and many other features also. Say like zero downtime means uh, you don't face any difficulties, just like the WhatsApp or Facebook, which goes down when there are some issues with web servers, or if some servers are going down. But here, no issues of that kind, because it can run in multiple locations and in multiple nodes. So anyone can simply replicate and run the application. And EVM, as I already mentioned, EVM, I would say, is like the entry point to the network, or which makes like to feel the complete network as a single computer, because you will not feel like you are a simple client, or you are just a peer in the network. You are just a part of the whole computing machinery. Just like all the nodes, I think there are almost 4,000 plus nodes which will be live at any time, and more than 9,000 nodes are actually there in Ethereum network. So all these 9,000 nodes across the globe, they will act as a single computer. That is what the role of EVM, similar to that of a JVM, which I already mentioned. So once you write a smart contract, this will be in readable English language. So you have the Solidity compilers. I think in the next session, you will learn about the compiler and the ID. There is an ID known as a Remix, which is an online ID, which have the Solc compiler, which we use for compiling the Solidity file. And once compiled, you will get the bytecode, which means like you don't have to share your program to anyone. You just share the bytecode, and any machine which have this EVM can simply run it. Just like the same thing which you follow in the Java also. And Java also use the bytecode for running it. So same is the process with Ethereum also. So this makes it a global computer, or what I call as a world computer. So the idea of Vitalik Buterin and team is like in the coming years, across the globe, all the machines connected in the internet will form a part of this Ethereum public blockchain network, and there will be a single world computer which is in the Ethereum network, like just like the Play Store or any other kind of application portals. Anyone can come and deploy applications on Ethereum, which will be globally available, no region specific or no geographic limitations, and all the applications available across the globe, anyone can just come and use it. And that's the idea behind this world computer. So some quick statistics, you can see like there are more than 12 crore Ethereum addresses globally. And I also already mentioned no need for like, it's nothing like one individual can have only one account, just like a bank account. Anyone can create as many number of Ethereum accounts as you wish, as I told, the externally owned accounts or EAOs. So you are free to create as many number of accounts as you wish. I think you will see an Ethereum account address in the coming sessions. And there are more than 9,000 nodes globally. So the chances of attacks are very, very less, because as you know, all the 9,000 nodes will have the same copy of the blockchain. And in every 11 to 13 seconds, you will create a new block. So if you want to be a successful attacker, you want to attack all the 9,000 nodes, change the blocks and rewrite the new thing within 13 seconds. So that is extremely difficult process. Even if you are using supercomputers or high power computing machineries, that is a really difficult process, because that's how they have the rewarding mechanism. Like if you are genuine and if you do the mining process, you will get a better reward than attacking the network. And till date, there is still October last, there were more than 888 million transactions which were conducted on top of Ethereum. So you can see the scale of Ethereum. A lot of people are adopting Ethereum for banking, supply chain, finance, and all those kind of things. So a lot of new transactions coming up, and a lot of adoptions are also coming up in Ethereum. So I will move on to the next session, like how the Ethereum works. So if you have any queries, I will just pause for a couple of minutes on the basics, and then I will go to the next session. So I know like the time limit is till 11 o'clock, so I don't want to exceed the time limit. If you have any queries, feel free to ask the queries. Otherwise, I'll move to the next session. Okay. Any queries? Or shall I move to the next session? Okay, so the next thing is about how the Ethereum works. So as I already mentioned about the nodes, accounts, transaction, and other details, Ethereum network, it's just like a simple mobile wallet, like your PhonePe or Paytm kind of things. You have a wallet which will manage your accounts, that is your ethers which are there in the network. And it can also manage your smart contracts, your contract address also. Then you will have your own node. So the node, for every node, that is every machine which is going to be connected, you will have your own Ethereum client. Ethereum client is nothing but a program, a component which will helps your node to connect to the network. So you have multiple clients like Get, Parity, Hyperledger. So many different clients are available in the Ethereum world. You will come to know that. And once the node is getting connected, then you have the DApps, that is a decentralized application, which will interact to the network for a fee. For a fee means like you have to pay ethers for doing some transactions. So this is the basic skeleton of the Ethereum network, or you can say like there's the main things. You have a wallet and a DApp, and then you have the node which will connect to the network. So as a beginner, what you will be actually doing is like, first step is you will be creating, or you will be downloading a wallet. There are many online software wallets available. You can also use other kind of wallets like high security hardware wallets, paper wallets, and all those things are there. But primarily you can just download a software wallet. You will create your own account. So MetaMask is one of the most common Ethereum wallets which you can create an account, and with that you will connect to the network. You will have a client which will connect you to the network, and then you will start writing your program, that is the DApp development. You will start writing your code, and that will interact to the network. So as I already mentioned in the first slide, Ethereum works on the basis of state. So you can see, like I have mentioned a very simple example of a door. So you know, like a door can simply have two states. Either it is in an open state or it is in a closed state. So state is a unique configuration of that particular machine. Say like whatever computing you are going to do, it will have its own states. From one input state, it will move to an output state, and from that output state, it can move to some other kind of states. So all those states will be well defined, and there will not be any kind of ambiguous states, because if there are some kind of ambiguous states, it will never ever work, or it will actually fail. That is a thing. So that is what you should do with the smart contract. So here in the case of door, you can just see the example. If it is in the open state, say the first stage, the door is open, there is an open kind of things. You do a transition. Transition means from one state you are going to do some kind of transition, and you have a condition also. Like, okay, this is the current state, like it is in the open state. There should be some kind of condition. So if a door is opened, I can't open it again, because if I'm putting more force to open it, the door will either break off or it will not work. So check the condition from the current state, what you have to do, and you have the action, like the transition action, which will move it to the closed state. So similarly, from that closed state, you can have another action, that is to open the things. So each and every state will have its own input and output, and that should be finite. Like you should not have any open endpoints, or you should not have any ambiguous kind of things that will be happening in the network. That is the most important thing of an Ethereum network. So there is very basic things, which is not the concern of a developer. Like from the developer perspective, you don't have to worry about these kind of things. This will actually happen internally. That is what is coded in the backend side of Ethereum. So as a programmer, what you will be doing is like you can simply write a smart contracts, and the smart contracts will be interacting with the states of the Ethereum network, or with the states which will be the global states. Just like you are defining some global variables, you will have some global states, and every transaction in using the smart contract will be making some changes to that particular state. Okay. And next, once the blockchain is created, as you all know, Genesis block is a very first block, or it is a very first state, which is commonly the blank state, no transaction there. Whenever new transactions get executed, this will move to the new states, that is state transitions keeps on adding. And always whatever be the current state, that is just like a dynamic storybook, which I mentioned in the second slide. You keep on adding the pages, and every page will have its own story, that is the state transition, or the what do you call the kind of computing which is happening with the smart contract. And there is no endpoint unless the network is truly growing. You will keep on adding the states, and that will keep on growing in all the nodes. This is not just in a single node, but these states will be updated in all the nodes across the world. So you can see, like why you can eliminate a server, or why you can eliminate a third party is like, because all the things are transparent here. Everyone in the network knows what is the state of the network. So everyone can simply come and verify whether this is right or wrong, or whether this is a current state or not. So you cannot cheat anyone in this network, because if I'm telling like today this is heavily raining in Kerala and this is night here, but if all of you are actually verifying the states from all the nodes in Kerala, you can see like this is not raining in Kerala and this is daytime in Kerala. So same as the case, like you take the states of all the transactions, which make sure that it is trusted and transparent, and no need for any third parties or any central authorities. And once these transactions are related together, you will just keep on adding to the blocks. Like I think you already know about the block structure. You have a header which stores the basic details of blocks, and then you will list out all the transactions. So in the header, you will have the index, block number, timestamp, Merkle root and all those kind of things. Here in Ethereum, you use a modified form of Merkle root called a Patricia tree. So it's almost the same as that of Bitcoin. Like you keep on adding the transactions to the block, and this keeps on moving. And this will keep validating using the proof of work. So till date, this is in proof of work. That is, the mining will happen, and in the coming future, it will move to proof of stake. So you can see, like in the figure, I have started from a Genesis block, the blue color one. Then I have a green chain, which is a canonical blockchain, which I mentioned, and I also have some ash color blocks also. So these ash color blocks are the uncle blocks or stale blocks. That is, at the same moment, there can be more than one blocks which can get created. So say, for example, consider the Genesis block. From the Genesis block, you have one green block which is created. That is the first block one. And from there, there were two options, like two blocks were created at that moment. So how the chain grows is like it will check for the longest chain, like who is able to create the next block. So it will keeps on carrying at least till 6 to 7 blocks. It will check whether there are some parallel blocks. Like there can be situations where two or more miners can compete and they can create blocks parallelly, but it will not last for long. Like maximum to 6 or 7 blocks it can keep on adding, and then it will always follow the longest chain rule. So here you can see, like the green is the longest thing which is growing, because the other thing just dies out because they were unable to create the next block, or it wasn't following the same thing. But that will not be removed from the entire blockchain. What it does is, like, it will be kept as uncle nodes, or it will store the data assets in the network, and some amount of mining reward will also be given to that uncle nodes. That is a basic protocol kind of things. So from the developer perspective or from a user perspective, you may not be aware of these uncle nodes, or you may not be aware of these side things which are happening. You will just view the blockchain as a single kind of things. You will keep on adding the transactions, and you will keep on mining the blocks and doing your own business. But in the backend, if there are possibilities like multiple blocks gets added at parallel, this can also be one possibility. And that is where the forks can appear. So forks means it is just like branching the chain. So there are two types of forks. I'm not going too much detail here. I think you already learned about forks in the Bitcoin session. There is two types of forks: hard fork and soft fork. Hard fork means that it's a strict rule, like from today onwards the network is following a new protocol. You cannot roll back, or you cannot follow the old one. Soft fork means like there are two conditions: either you follow the old stream or you can follow the new stream. That is the two conditions of soft fork. So this is how the things will actually work. So I think with this I will wind up this session. Say, like I have already covered the complete working of Ethereum. So I would like to take the Q&A sessions. Say, like, if you have any kind of queries, or if you have any kind of doubts regarding Ethereum, feel free to ask, because I know, like, I can teach the entire Ethereum in just 1 hour or 2 hours. Ethereum, even the developer program, lasts for more than 10 days or 15 days. So this is a really vast topic. Each and every slide have its own explanations in vast, which I can't cover completely over here. But we can move to the Q&A session, so that we will make sure that all your queries get answered, and if you have any confusions, we can take it further. So thank you for attending this session. Hope we can move to the Q&A sessions, and I would love to take questions from you, so that all of you will get an idea of what exactly is happening in Ethereum. And in the next session, you will learn about the basics of smart contracts, or how you are writing a smart contract, or how you can do the programming stuff on blockchain. Okay. So let's start with the Q&A session. Feel free to ask me questions if you have.
Sir, good morning.
Yeah, good morning.
Sir, I would like to know, what is this MetaMask actually? Is it a D app, or is it something else?
Okay, so MetaMask is not a D app. MetaMask is a what do you call? It's a software wallet, I would say, just like a normal application. You can get the plugin also. There is Google Chrome and Opera plugins for MetaMask. So what it actually does is, like, MetaMask helps you to create your own Ethereum account addresses. Say like you can directly create your address using the Ethereum client. I already mentioned like there are many clients like Get Parity and all, but that is purely a command line kind of interaction, which will be difficult for the non-programmers. So what a common man can easily do is like they can simply download the wallet, just like how you are using your PhonePe or Google Pay kind of things. You just simply download and install it in your web browser, and within a couple of button clicks you can create your own address. Because I think you studied yesterday, like for any account address, whether it is Bitcoin or Ethereum, you have a private key public key combination. Like you will have a private key, on top of which you will create a public key, and on top of public key you will use a cryptographic hashing mechanism, just like the SHA-256, and you will create a hexadecimal address. So that hexadecimal address is your actual address in the Ethereum network, and it is extremely difficult to remember your private key accurately. Like like it is almost a 20 byte size, so to remember private key using human brain is really a tough task. So what MetaMask does is like it will help you to set a password, just like your email ID and password. You can set a password for your account in the MetaMask, and it will also give you a password recovery option, just like there is a 12 seed word password recovery option. You can store your seed words, and if you have lost your password, you have to just repeat the seed words properly. It is just like an interface kind of thing, which helps you to save your private key properly, which helps you to easily create your accounts, and which helps you to manage transactions and connect to the network. Like if you're writing smart contracts with Remix IDE, and if you want to do transactions on the Ethereum network, the MetaMask will help you to connect you to the network, connect you to your Ethereum network and the smart contract, and easily connect the DApp also. So it's like a tool which makes your life easier, like reduces the programming part and avoid the command line interaction. That is the main thing. Just like how you are using the DOS and Windows kind of things, because you can do all the functionalities of MetaMask by using Get client, but you have to code the complete things. Right? You need to write the complete things by code, but MetaMask is just a GUI kind of interface. So hope that answers your query. I think in the next session, you will see what is MetaMask, and you will work on it. So that will be more clear. I'm not going to show you MetaMask here because you have it in the next session.
Yes, we had installed that plugin yesterday, and we did some work based on it.
Okay.
But I would like to know, so the accounts that we create in MetaMask is actually Ethereum accounts, right?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks. Thank you.
So
Thanks.
if you already installed the MetaMask, then I can tell you, like in MetaMask you have multiple options. Say like you can either directly connect to the Ethereum main network, or you can connect to the test networks. Like there is Ropsten,
right?
Ringb, Coven, and all. And you can also connect to the local host also. Say like if you want to run Ethereum as a private network within your machine, then you can also run it as a local network also.
Okay, so all this Ropsten and all, they are actually test networks, right?
Yeah, they are test networks. So because spending real Ether will be expensive, because like it's more than $300 per Ether. So from the developer perspective, if you want to test your smart contracts and if you want to test your DApps, what you'll do is like you will directly deploy it either on your private network or on your test networks. So it will have all the features as that of a main network, but the only thing is like you will be just playing with the fake ethers. Like the ethers which you get in the test network is not the actual ones. You will just come and see the fake ethers. So once it is working properly in the test networks, you can compute the expense for your smart contract. You can compute the gas value, gas price, all those parameters for deploying your contract. And you can tell like, okay, I have written a blockchain smart contract for finance or for banking. And for deploying the contract, I need 0.2 ethers. And for per transaction, I need 0.01 ethers. So these computations will be done based on it's working on the test networks or on the private networks.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So any other questions?
Sir, hi, good morning.
Yeah, good morning. Please carry on.
Sir, actually, when you talked about this fork, that means Ungle blocks and all, right? Actually,
Yes.
I am very new to blockchain and also I don't know. Sometimes that may be the reason for the doubt. But actually, what is the reason for this creation of these Ungle nodes and why it is happening? Who's creating that?
Okay. So how these uncle nodes actually get created is like, say, at a single moment, if multiple blocks are getting created, say, I already told like there are more than 9,000 nodes in the network. So if you're broadcasting the transactions, these transactions may not be reaching all the 9,000 nodes at once, because there can be some kind of network latency and some bandwidth issues across the world. So there are chances like at some points, uh, two parallel blocks may create at some single instance. So that is a rare possibility, but that still happens. So like at some points you can have two block rewards at a single instance. So what it actually does is like it will keep on checking whether he or she or whether this block can win in the next thing also. So I'll give a simple example, not in the blockchain world, but in a real scenario. Say consider a sports event. Say like you're conducting a 100-meter race, and you have almost 75 participants registered for this 100-meter race. And like at a time you can maximum 5 participants or 6 participants can run in the track. So you will be conducting heats. You know about heats, right?
Yeah.
There will be the preliminary qualification round, and from each heats, one participant or two participant will be qualified to the semi-finals or quarterfinals kind of things. So same is the case here also. Since you have 9,000 nodes here, it will do the things parallelly across the world, which means like there are at some moment there are chances like multiple blocks can be created parallelly. It's just like the preliminary round. So in the next round also, if both these creators say like I am creating one block here in India, and say a person X is creating another block in US at the same moment. So if we both are able to create the next block also, then both that blocks will be added. But at somehow say like I am not able to create the next block, and the person X is going to create the next block. So what happens is like I have shown in that slide. So what happens is like my node or my block will be stopped at that moment, and he will be carrying on with his block. Yeah, you can see like the green will be the most validated one, and the ash one can stop at any moment, which if it is not going to create the next one. So theoretically, at maximum of 6 to 7 uh, uh, 6 to 7 blocks can get created as angle nodes, but practically that won't go too much long, because like if like there are parallel winners or there are parallel blocks, you will try to win the next block by adding on more computational power. So if I know like there is an angle node in US, what I will do is like just to win the next block, I will keep on increasing my computational power. Same as the case, that person will also keep on increasing. So
Sir, then
maybe
how I am, suppose I am, how the person in India will be informed or will be knowing that another person is also
you can,
doing the same?
yeah, you can always check the block explorer. There is a site called Etherscan, which will list out who is the current winner of the block. I will just show the Etherscan. Just a minute. So this is like a global block explorer where you can see what blocks are being added and who is the winner. 1 minute. I will just show that website. Okay, so sorry, I'll share my screen. Okay, so hope you can see my screen right now. This is the Etherscan, which is an online Ethereum blockchain explorer. You can see the total number of transactions, the market cap, all those kind of things, and the latest transactions also. So here you can see the latest blocks. Say, for example, the current block number 1118246, and it is mined by Ethermine. Ethermine would be an mining pool. I think you know about mining pools. It is like a group of miners comparing together, giving a name and start mining so that they get more rewards of that kind. So here the winner or who have actually did the things. Like if there are some kind of uncles, I'll just check for the uncles. Yeah, view the uncles. You have an option for viewing the uncles. So you can see like see the block height at 1118251. There was an uncle at 50. Like just the previous position, there was an uncle, but this ether miner, they have either they have increased the mining power or they have did maximum mining, and they win the 51. So if you just go through in the backside, you can see like just a previous block, you have the uncle and you will either keep on increasing the things. You know the uncle and you will just keep on. So here I can see like, yeah, here, if you have seen this 11182 here from 128, 129, there were two uncles, and at 130, the Babel pool was actually winning it. So you can see how the uncles are happening and what you have to do with the next kind of things. But that is primarily the concern of the crypto mining pools only, because they will be concerned about getting the rewards. But from the developer perspective, that doesn't have any impact, because whether your data goes to the actual block or to the uncle blocks, it will lie as in the blockchain. So from the developer perspective or from the smart contract or DApp, this won't be a concern. The concern will be only to the miners just to get the reward. You can see like, if you check the rewards here, you will never ever see a 0x. Yeah, only there is one 0x account here. That is a individual miner who have mined a block. But otherwise, you can see like all those things are mining pools. That is, those who are actually investing to create mining pools for gaining the rewards. So I hope that answers your query, right? That won't be a big issue for you, and that uncle nodes will also be added in the blockchain, or you will have a sidechain kind of things where your transactions will be also listed over here. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Any other queries?
Sir, hello, sir.
Yes, please carry on.
Sir, let me know which blockchain is the best.
So in the public blockchain context, I would say Ethereum is the best, because Ethereum have the maximum community support and the maximum number of maximum number of nodes, because you can say like there are much faster networks than Ethereum. Say like if EOS, Tron, all those networks are faster than Ethereum, but when compared to the scale of Ethereum, there are just hardly 1,000 or 2,000 nodes, or the community support is much less. So in the public blockchain, because all the things have actually started from Ethereum itself, so I would say like Ethereum is the one with maximum community support and maximum acceptance, and it will stay as such for long, because you have a fairly good number of developers over here. So the chances of dying out is very less in Ethereum. And for the permission blockchains, say like the context of Hyperledger, Corda, or Quorum kind of things, there the choice should be on the basis of your use case. Say like if you are focusing on the banking transactions or anything on the financial side, I would say like Corda is one of the most prominent one, because it is formed by the consortium of banks. So you have almost all the banks in the Corda networks, all the prominent banks in the Corda networks, and they have all the functionalities for it. Say if you're focusing on supply chain, Hyperledger Sawtooth will be the best one, because it is more or less focused on supply chain kind of things. And for any other kind of general purpose permission systems, Hyperledger Fabric is the best one. Fabric is used in almost all the permission kind of stuff. So depending on the business use case, you can choose from the permission one. That is what you are actually going to implement, or what is your actual application area. Based on that only, you have to choose a network. And for the public blockchains, not just because I'm delivering the Ethereum session, but you can just Google it and check the size of Ethereum and other networks, like, because all the other public networks started from Ethereum. So just to follow the one which have the maximum followers, that's the best option.
So one more question, sir.
Yeah, please.
So whether the government organizations are using this blockchain technology?
Yes. So please don't confuse between the technology and the token part. There are many government initiatives. I haven't put that slide here because that was not in context. Say like Andhra Pradesh is using blockchain for land records and many initiatives. In Kerala, we work with agriculture sector, health record management. We have a government funded, or a government of India funded a vaccine supply chain traceability solution called ImmunoChain, which is already being piloted in Trivandrum. Around 27 health centers, it is already being piloted, which is running on Hyperledger Sawtooth. Like the entire vaccine supply chain data management is there. Then we work in many other domains. So the technology is fairly well accepted by the government. in almost all the domains, say like the land registry, the public notary mechanism, health record management, identity management. There are many use cases which are coming up. The only thing is like the token system or the cryptocurrency is not yet accepted as a legal tender. Legal tender, I think you know the definition. For the legal transactions, you are not allowed to use the crypto tokens, but it doesn't means like government can ban a currency, because it is unable to ban a cryptocurrency as it lies in the public network. So that is the difference between contract. That is what I was mentioning about Ether and Ethereum separately. Ether is the just a token part of it, but Ethereum is actual blockchain skeleton or the blockchain network. Okay.
Sir,
Yeah, please.
so in Ethereum, there is it needs some gas fee for executing transaction, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so if I implement an application, if I have created a DApp
Yes.
in blockchain, then does that impose more service charge for the consumers, for the customers?
Not exactly, because for initial deployment into the live network, you need some amount of ethers, but that will be say hardly based on your smart contract and the app, say hardly 0.1 or 0.2 ethers will be maximum needed. If it is a bigger kind of DApp, say you need maximum 1 ether or 2 ether. And for the transactions, say like if the customer just want to view the data, so for viewing things, there are some functions which even doesn't cost you any ether. But if you want to write some data or if you want to put some data into blockchain, then you will have some amount of ethers needed. So this is just like a controlling mechanism, just to make sure that only genuine consumers will come into the blockchain, and not allowing any attackers or any free goers to come and use it. So if you are a genuine customer, say for any banking transaction also, in the backend side, there is a cost for it. Either it is being taken as your ATM service charge or other kind of service charges. Otherwise, you are directly going to pay for your service charge. So same case in Ethereum also, a kind of service charge is there. But when compared to the centralized systems, it will be a much cheaper. That's what I would say. Like even though the ether costs around $300, you don't have to spend 1 ether or 2 ether for each and every transaction. It will be hardly say 0.001 ethers or less than that, because like ether is divisible at to 8 places, and even you can extend it up to 16 also in the coming future. So Vitalik and his team is actually trying to reduce the gas cost in the coming versions, because when it shifts from proof of work to proof of stake, the cost will be reduced. Even for deploying the smart contracts also, in the Istanbul update, they reduce the gas cost for deploying the smart contracts. So that won't be a huge expense when compared to the expense for the cloud services, the droplets, domain services, and all those things when compared together. Like as a company, if you're going to deploy your application on a cloud service or on a droplet account kind of things, then comparing the monthly charges or the monthly expenses, this won't be a huge amount.
Okay, sir. One more question: is there any micropayment applications using blockchain technology? No?
Yeah, there are a lot of applications coming up. Even there are peer-to-peer transfer applications on blockchain, like without any bank or without any third parties. Just like your WhatsApp, like the account number or your contact, you can simply send cryptos in between. Or there are many coin exchanges also. I don't want to name the exchanges, but there are many exchanges which helps you to simply do the micro payments, like the peer-to-peer banking, lending mechanisms. Even the Andhra Pradesh government is trying to implement T-Chits. T-Chits is, sorry, not Andhra, Telangana. Telangana Chits, that is a chit funds on blockchain, where you can keep track of your payments, make payments, and all those things can happen on a simple mobile application which runs on blockchain. It's a possibility.
For digital money transfer,
Yes,
other than this
yes,
cryptocurrency.
yes. It need not be a cryptocurrency. Either it can be a fiat currency or a cryptocurrency.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yeah. Any other queries?
We have one more question in the chat.
Yeah, please carry on.
How we can secure vehicular communication using blockchain?
Okay, so if you are speaking about the VANET and that kind of networks, there are many IoT plus blockchain implementations which are coming up. Say I have very recently, I could say like the ride sharing applications similar to the Uber and all. I think you may be familiar about Lezos and Car2Go, which are actually ride sharing applications or car rental services primarily focused in European countries. They uses blockchain. Like you will have a smart card where you can go and take car from any parking lot. You can use it as a pay-per-use kind of model, and you can also invest in cars also. Say like the Verklar network, like they have a network of cars, just like the connected car kind of systems. Mostly they are using the electric cars or the hybrid cars to save the fuel and all. So once you go to the charging center, so once you recharging it, that payments and all those things will be taken care of by the system itself. So instead of purchasing a new car, like car is actually a depreciating asset. Say like if I'm purchasing a car for 5 lakh today, after 3 years or 4 years, the value will be just 2 lakhs or less than that. So instead of spending 5 lakhs on a single car, you invest in this company where you can put say 50,000 each in 10 different cars. And that cars, when they are being used by the people or when they are using this network, you will get tokens. They have their own tokens similar to Ether or Bitcoin. They have their tokens which will be credited to your wallet, and you can use that tokens for using the car. Say for the daily commute, I need a 2-seater car. For a weekend trip, I need an SUV, or for going on trips, with my friends, I need a bigger van or something. So I can choose whatever vehicle which is there in the with the company, and I can have it a paper use kind of thing. So like a car is never ever a depreciating asset. And even Mercedes-Benz, they are very recently released a paper like by 2030, Mercedes-Benz may not be selling any car to individuals in Europe, but they will be having this rental mode. Like the cars will be available in the parking lots. I think in India that is not that much popular because we don't have parking lots in every community over here. But in most of the European countries, you have parking lots in almost all the residential areas. So the company directly will put the cars or put the vehicles in the parking lots, and you can just go and swipe the card and use it like a pay-per use kind of things. So the life of car, so like hardly 5 years or 10 years will be the life of a car, or every year the company can release a new car for the parking lot. Because if the Mercedes-Benz predicts like in an individual ownership or on a private car, the 95% of the entire lifetime of car will be lying as idle in a garage or in a shed. You will be using the car only for 5% of its entire lifetime. Whether you are doing 1 lakh kilometer or 2 lakh kilometer or 10 years or 15 years, most of the time the car will be lying idle in a parking lot or in your house. So what they suggest is like they will be making the car utilize maximum either to shift it to at least 30% is what they are predicting. Yeah, that kind of initiatives are happening mostly with the connected cars, as well as for car rental, as well as car leasing kind of things. So in India, there are no such things. Like infrastructure is one of the important hindrance over here. You don't have parking lots, or you don't have charging point kind of things. It is just coming up. I hope it will happen over here. I have seen some blockchain-based examples mostly in the European context.
So one more question is there, sir.
Yeah,
which one will we use, Hyperledger or Ethereum?
it's Ethereum. It's primarily public blockchain. So what I've seen is in the public blockchain, because they want to primarily all of them are using tokens. So for designing tokens and deploying tokens, Ethereum is the most simple one. Even though you can deploy tokens in R3 Corda, but it's much easier in Ethereum. Sorry, in Ethereum. So I've seen this in public blockchains. Yeah.
I think no more question left. So
Okay.
thank you, Adarsh, for coming and present a very good session. I think a lot of questions has been asked by participants.
Yeah.
So
Okay,
I would like to call Komal to give her opinion about the session. Komal, please.
Yes, sir. Good morning, all of you. I, Mrs. Komal Pardeshi from Walchand Institute of Technology, Solapur, Maharashtra, propose a vote of thanks. Actually, first, I would like to thank AICTE and LBS College of Engineering and Mr. Sandeep Chandran for organizing this workshop for all of us, because as blockchain is an emerging technology today, everyone must know about this blockchain. So we are all are thankful to you for organizing such a nice workshop for all of us. And on behalf of all the participants, I would like to thank Mr. Adarsh for introducing us with public blockchain and Ethereum, and also clarifying the doubts of all the participants very nicely. So I thank you, all of you, and thank you for organizing such nice sessions for us. Thank you, sir.
So thank you so much for these wonderful words. I think there are many questions regarding contact. I will share. So I will just share our e-learning website, which is by KBA. You can, I know like this is just a basic kind of things, so you can learn with free courses at our e-learning website. There is a program called Certified Blockchain Associate, which is a free program of 30 hours duration. Say like you will have 2 months of access. Like I know like I've just given very basic introduction to blockchain, so you can keep continuing with this initiative. This is a government of Kerala initiative, and there are many other developer programs also in the platform. You can do it, and you can also connect with our formal official channels. I will also give you the official channels. You can connect me at my email ID also. I will give you my email ID. Also in LinkedIn and Twitter also. My ID is Adarsh Sunil. You can connect me in LinkedIn and Twitter. I'm active in LinkedIn and Twitter. Or you can also connect in our official channels. Say we have a formal Telegram group and a LinkedIn group. Most of the KBA blockchain experts, mentors, and all those guys are actually very active in these groups. You can also connect us. Even if I'm not available, you can also connect us in that channels also. And if you are interested to pursue with learning blockchain, I would suggest to take this free course of 30 hours with the Certified Blockchain Associate, and you will have 2 months of access. You need to pay only if you want a certificate at the end. That's the only thing. And you can also pursue with the developer programs in Ethereum, Hyperledger, Fabric, Sawtooth, and Corda also in the website. So once again, thank you, Professor Sandeep Chandran, for inviting me, and thanks to the entire LBS team for conducting this wonderful workshop, wonderful FTP on blockchain. Thank you so much. Hope I don't want to exceed your time limit. I know like the other faculty will be waiting. I will wind up my session. Once again, thank you so much.
Adar sir, sorry to disturb you, sir.
Okay, okay.
Adar sir.
Yes.
Sir, Sushil here, sir. Actually, I have joined this Kerala Academy. In this academy, every course is free of cost, or we have to pay something?
This Certified Blockchain Associate, the course is completely free. That is, you will get 2 months of access for this course. You need to pay only for the certificate. Like at the end, if you want to get the certificate, I think the course is around 5,000 plus tax is a certificate course. And for the developer programs, it's like you can enroll for free, but for it's like there are some free contents over there, and but if you're a paid candidate, you will get the complete instructor-led support. Say like there is a one-to-one instructor support and project development kind of things. So for that, you need to pay for it. Say like if you pay for the thing, you will get around, I think it's a 3 months access for each developer program. So that's your choice. So enrollment is almost free in all the programs. Say like you can just log in and see what all things are offered in the course, and all the free materials you can simply access it. And for the instructor support and for the complete project support, say like in developer program, you will be developing complete DApp. Say for Ethereum, you'll be developing complete DApp in Hyperledger Fabric. So the next batch is of Hyperledger Fabric, which will start on November 15th on online mode, where you will get an end-to-end instructor support for 14 weeks if you're a paid candidate. So like you'll be learning the Hyperledger Fabric, and you will develop and complete end-to-end product on Hyperledger Fabric and deploy it on the network. So for that, you need
to... Hyperledger Fabric developer course is running, sir, or it will start?
It will start on November 15th.
Okay, sir. I will register for that, sir.
Okay.
Thanks, Lord.
Thank you.
Any other queries? Yeah. Okay. I think if there are no further
Okay.
queries, we can wind up. I don't want to take. It's already 8 minutes late. I know.
Okay.
It's
Yesterday they
fine.
have given complaints that we are extending time. That's why.
Okay. Okay. So anyway, I don't
Okay.
want to take it further. Okay. So keep in touch. If you have any queries, you can either mail me or we can connect it to our official channels also. Feel free to connect me through mail or our channels. Okay. Nice meeting you all. Once again, thank you so much for attending this session. Thank you, sir.
Adarsh.
Thank you.
So some queries are there. Main thing is recording. I will be sharing that soon. I will be sharing the YouTube channel link. So all the material will be there. And regarding the PPT, some companies are not providing the PPTs, especially KBA. They are not providing the PPT. So whatever provided, it will be available in the resource folder. Okay. You don't want to record. I will be sharing that soon. Okay. So next session is at 11:30. So 20 minutes left. Okay, you can go and come back. Thank you.